Welcome to this tutorial on how to whip stitch crochet pieces together. In this tutorial I'm going to whip stitch two granny squares together. However, you can use it to assemble any two pieces, like for garments, beanies, anything you need to assemble at the end. I have a needle and the same yarn as the final round of the granny squares and the two granny squares, of course. Start by inserting the needle into the first stitch on both granny squares. These are the corresponding stitches, so we can follow along to weave it in nicely. Leave a little bit of a yarn tail at the end to weave in later. Then move the yarn to the other side, insert this needle into the two corresponding stitches and pull the yarn through. At this point you have finished the first whip stitch and insert the needle into the next stitch to do another one. Make sure the yarn is always on the right side and the needle on the left side when you pull through. This is how it looks after a few stitches. Insert the needle into the next stitch and pull through. Move the yarn to the right side and insert the needle into the next stitch. And this is all it is. The whip stitch is super easy and a great way to assemble pieces like granny squares and other crochet pieces you might make for any project. So all you have to do is insert the needle into the next stitch to the left all the way until the end. You can see how it looks. It gives kind of a spiraling look, but it's almost invisible when you use the same yarn color. So you're going to repeat all the way until the end, and then let me show you a few more times. Insert the needle through both the corresponding stitches on each end and pull through, and repeat again, doing this in each and every stitch all the way to the end of the granny squares. But one thing you need to know is you don't necessarily need to have stitches corresponding like you have on this example. You can do it along the edge of any crocheted pieces. Just line them up and insert the needle through the crochet fabric that you have already made. So it doesn't necessarily have to be corresponding stitches, it could be also just corresponding fabric. And this is a great way to assemble any crochet piece, and the seam is almost invisible, and in the end you have assembled the pieces and your project is finished. I'm close to the end now, inserting the needle through one of the last stitches, and the next thing I'm going to show you is how to continue on to the next two granny square pieces in case you were assembling a bigger piece. So this is how it looks after you've finished whip stitching the two granny squares together, and you can see how the seam looks. And now we're ready to add two more granny squares, and I'm going to show you how to continue on to the next one. You're going to start the exactly same way as you did on the last one, but you continue with the same yarn, and you don't have to cut the yarn or anything to move on. So inserting the needle into the first and pull the yarn through, and just pull the yarn to make sure the granny squares are close together. You might need to repeat that when you do another whip stitch. Just push the granny squares closer together so you don't have a gap between the pair of granny squares. So just pull gently and the granny squares are attached to each other. Then you can just continue on doing whip stitches along the edge of the two new granny squares until you reach the end. So just continue going through the corresponding stitches and doing the whip stitches as I've showed you earlier in this tutorial. And I'll catch you at the end of this granny square to show you the next steps. So we're finishing up the seam on these two granny squares. I'm just pulling the yarn through, and you have now seamed two of the granny squares paired together. However, you have to also do the other row, and you'll do that the exact same way, and your granny squares are attached together. You can do this with more granny squares or pieces the same way. Thank you so much for watching this gel motion crochet tutorial. Have a nice day.